When I think of developer Eton Games, I think about the V-Rally series in the 90s, which if you live in North America were branded as Need for Speed games, though they also did a PlayStation port of Porsche Unleashed using the same engine from V-Rally 2, a game I actually put a lot of hours into on the PS1 growing up. I only bring this up because the Dreamcast version in North America is called Test Drive V-Rally. That Test Drive Unlimited is not Eton Games' first foray into the series, and is technically the only test drive game I've ever played before this one for the review. I mean, come on, I couldn't have played every single racing franchise under the sun at that point. The Test Drive series began in the 1980s on Amiga systems developed by Accolade, and throughout the period they were diverse, but not as well received as rivals like Gran Turismo and Need for Speed, apart from ones that were only Test Drive in name, including Test Drive Le Mans or Test Drive V-Rally. But by 2002, V-Rally publisher Infogrames were in the middle of one of the craziest spending sprees in gaming history, acquiring lots of different developers and publishers, and the next year with hundreds of millions of dollars in net losses, rebranded themselves as one giant Atari company. Basically, the Test Drive franchise became part of Atari by 2003, and Eton Games developing the next title wanted to do something very different, while also going back to its traditional roots after TD Overdrive. What started as looking for different places to set their next title, they wanted the best of both worlds control-wise, a combination of simulation and arcade, having customizable characters and setting itself on an open world map. It was intended to be a launch title for the Xbox 360 when it was announced in 2005, before it got delayed plenty of times well into the next year, releasing on September 2006. And though there are other versions on the PlayStation 2 and PSP which were developed by the same team who also made Test Drive Le Mans, we're looking at the 360 version specifically. Now, the Need for Speed series had already done this, where it went from selecting an event in the menu to a fully fledged map driving to the start line, and that was most likely inspired by games including Grand Theft Auto and Jak 2, where having a large map that had everything to explore was a truly addictive concept, as well as online interactivity for races. But with Test Drive Unlimited, you had an entire Hawaiian island with over 1,000 miles of tarmac to drive on, and with Xbox Live and online gameplay a much higher focus coming next generation, so was this game, allowing you to enter the map with other players on the map as you're free roaming with customizable characters. Which, according to the producers, this was one of the first racing games to do this. It was under the assumption that players were going to put most of their hours online. And you know what? With all the opponents on the map that appear every once in a while, it does feel like I'm playing an always online game. This also means it feels a lot more casual and no nonsense compared to something like Need for Speed or Forza Horizon, and less restrictive on how you approach the events in any particular order.
The passengers for flight 6814 to Honolulu are asked to please present themselves for boarding at gate C.
Ladies and gentlemen, please have your passports and boarding passes ready for inspection.
The game begins with selecting a character waiting at the airport, fly to the Oahu Island in Hawaii, select a car to rent so you can drive to the real estate agent, then eventually visit the dealership for your first car. After that, the game won't tell you much else apart from a ranking increase. Though the entire map is fully unlocked to explore at the beginning, you're mostly near the outskirts of Honolulu, and even then another new event seems like you're always driving on a different piece of road. Then you drive a few miles east, you're thinking, how long did that take to get this far? Next thing, you're entering events that set itself all over the place and are literally over 100 miles long. Less than 20% complete, and look how much I've explored with this many events scattered. I know the whole map isn't just roads, but wow, unlimited indeed. The claim that this game has thousands of miles of tarmac, I believe that to be true. Some maps are good at giving you the illusion that it's larger than it actually is. This one doesn't even need to. The best comparison I can make for Test Drive Unlimited would be the true crime titles I reviewed in 2020. All these games use satellite imagery as a base, then a team of developers would be sent down there to capture as many photos and videos of the area as possible to design a near 100% recreation. And because Eton Games selected Oahu for this game, for which I've heard is a great place to spend a holiday, that's what it felt like to the developers. And that's the difference between the two games, where it's set, not in the middle of a city where you see the same buildings every 10 seconds. The map in this game is scaled back a bit so it's roughly 70% accurate. It's hard to tell because I've never been to Hawaii, but I can tell you it's better to look at with all these different terrains, elevations, variety, etc. A little more focus is put on the environment. However, like a lot of real life based maps, it has the same issues too. Most of the map consists of long straights and highways during events, and sometimes sometimes if you want to reach a certain destination, the highways are set up so it's almost like you have to take the longest way. For example, I was in the middle of transporting a Ferrari Enzo, accidentally missed a turn where the finish was about 400 meters away, and the reroute was another 16 kilometers long. I'm just saying it's not like a Need for Speed or Forza Horizon title where it's designed like a video game. And be aware of where the satnav takes you sometimes. Like a GTA GPS, it guides you based on the rules of the road. But even the spots that look like they're fun to drive, there's a lot of uneven road elevation that affects the gameplay more than it should. It's hard to explain. And also plenty of instances where the road's just stopped. I wanted to see if there was a tunnel, but it was a dead end. Other little mishaps include cars appearing skinnier than they should, like the gameplay footage output is squished a little too much. And there's also a lot of texture pop here, not just in game, but in the map menu. And with its size, it's obviously not as good looking as other racing games I played on the Xbox 360 over the years. But for an early 7th gen title, I'll let it slide. It's kind of funny how so many games from the mid 2000s brag about the fact it's a HD game. To be fair, it was a big deal at the time, and I'm honestly impressed that Test Drive Unlimited looks as good as it does on a map this size. Like, could you imagine what this game would look like if it got a complete makeover and got the graphical detail of today's games, like the long draw distance of an Uncharted 4, Red Dead Redemption, or Forza Horizon? This map would be perfect for that treatment. Maybe a fan-made mod for the PC version? Anyone watching this who's good at that sort of thing, there's an idea for you.
Smart, I buckled up, huh?
Anyway, once you've driven on a road, you can skip destinations to events. You can even use it to at least shortcut to where you want to be. And with a map this size, I'm really glad they did that. I remember criticizing Need for Speed Underground 2, how you have to drive a long way to shops for certain parts, and potentially needing to drive back and forth all over the map just to get the right style for your car. In Test Drive Unlimited, the only time you need to make the distance is if you simply haven't explored that bit. The color represents what you've driven on, and the more you explore, the higher the ranking increases. At least it plays a role in it anyway. The events are also placed in a way that it's an excuse to drive past that little bit of road you might have missed, and even if you quit out, you've already explored that part, which can unlock additional events without real fanfare thanks to its online style, which is another way that the game makes you underestimate how big this map is. You've got race, time trial, and speed trap events, and others like trying to reach the top speed before the time runs out. It's not, how can I call it, fully realized. For example, looking at the event title, this one expects you to reach the top speed while dodging oncoming traffic, but instead you can just switch lanes, no problem. And the satnav can catch you off guard because the way it works, it assumes you're driving at a normal speed. And if you don't know a part of a map or if you have a fast car, you barely have a chance to make the corner.
Turn left. Turn right. Turn left.
Satnav voice and many words. Despite these nitpicks, the event variety is surprisingly plentiful. It also helps when you're almost always driving somewhere new because of the map size, and that most events are categorized based on class, manufacturer, and even car model specific, like these hitchhiker or top model pickups.
Sorry, but I wouldn't want to be seen in that kind of car. Thanks anyway.
Wow, the developers must have taken inspiration from Top Gear's Cool Wall, supercars considered to be too vulgar. Also, I find it funny that these people are meant to be in a hurry but are willing to wait for hours or even days on end until you have the right car, like you're the only driver on the island.
Hi, what kind of car do you call this? I prefer family cars, more roomy, but hey, it's okay.
What are you talking about? This is a four-door saloon. But at least it's a good excuse to drive lots of different vehicles in this game. There are even transportation and delivery missions where you're using a different car. I mean, right from the start, you're already driving a Ferrari Enzo. You can't complain with that. Is it me, or does every person on these missions look shady? And everything you do obviously earns you money to buy more cars and real estate to make room for more cars. I assume it was a focus for the developers to have different characteristics that stand out between other players while online, like a badge in Halo, because you can also earn tokens to buy clothes for your character, edit the facial features, and going back to the graphics, even on a console you have a lot of visual options. It was cool having the game show you how all these things work, and that you have these options. It's not like they existed in other racing games I played growing up. However, this might be just me. Even though you see your character all the time, the customization aspect, the the appeal of it wears off pretty quickly once you're paying more attention to the driving. Maybe I'm just very lazy when it comes to facial customization. However, the one thing I do take my time on is when I browse at the cars in a dealership, because not only can you choose the rims and the color of the exterior, but also the interior. I don't know, there's just something about it that's really cool. Like actually going to a manufacturer dealership, choosing all these details for your selected car. You can also rent them as a way to save money so you can use it just for a specific event. And if something is out of stock, you can pre-order one and later on in the game you get a message telling you it's ready to be picked up. And like I said before, along with choosing outfits, it's all simplified enough that it never feels tedious. And something that might have inspired Turn 10 to create the Auto Vista mode for Forza Motorsport 4. Even before you purchase a car, you can interact with it, open doors, windows, look in the interior and start the engine. Engine noises on some of these could have been better, but otherwise, sitting in the interior you feel like a little kid again and is a great love letter to cars. In total, there are 72 of them, along with 11 motorbikes, all with their interior views, which is a decent number for a game of this type back in 2006. Remember that Need for Speed Carbon, which came out a couple of months later, had just over half that number. And I guarantee there'll be at least one dream car you grew up always wanting to drive. Apart from anything made by Porsche or BMW, thanks mostly to licensing restrictions, which has become more crystal clear after reviewing so many racing games over the years. But how do they all control? Well, they aren't as smooth as Forza or PGR. Gravity is certainly heavy in Hawaii, but not bad. Each one I drove felt noticeably different from each other, and I understand that it steers more closely into simulation racer territory. I initially thought the driving aids were based on the car you chose and that you can decide from there, since you can change it in-game. But no, it's in the game settings. For a while I had it set to Hypersport, which meant nearly all the driving aids were turned off, and I just assumed it was another staple of the test drive series. Remember, this is my first test drive experience, and having everything on feels more like an arcade racer. And after a few hours of gameplay, when you reach supercar territory and traffic becomes harder to dodge, you'll certainly be tempted to turn everything on.
Turn left.
And even with all the assists switched on, as you can see from the gameplay, there's still hints of simulation handling. The way a car can easily understeer and straighten back without warning. That's the best way to describe it. I wouldn't recommend playing this game on the PC with a keyboard if that's the case. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for motorbikes. In fact, I almost forgot to put it in the script because that's how little I care for them. Even with the analog stick, the steering feels like it's all or nothing. In fact, when you let go of it, the bike is still cornering for over a second, and the way the rider moves around the bike, it looks robotic and unnatural. Although seeing a helmet view and cars and bikes racing each other is pretty cool, the whole inclusion of bikes feel like an afterthought. And considering that you need to discover every single car dealership on the map just to unlock them, at the very least, the effort doesn't match the reward. For the first couple of hours, I was worried about Test Drive Unlimited being too easy. Like, look at the distance between me and opponents in this race. You can measure it in kilometers. If you have evenly matched cars, sometimes you get one opponent who puts up a fight, but nonetheless a joke. And this also includes when you're free roaming. There is a wanted system, but is only triggered with a collision, not speeding, as you just saw. And from my experience, every moment I had with them, they were about as threatening as a little kitten. I never got caught by them, and a lot of the time, police aren't around to witness what happened, so it just goes away after a few seconds anyway. However, with time trials and speed traps, you do get to a point where your car simply isn't fast enough. Like, don't bother with the ones with no restrictions until you have something like a Ford GT. Or you can just resort to dirty tactics. That one was unintentional. I was a Class C car and that one was a Class A 50 miles faster, so doing that stopped it from blasting away on the straight. But anyway, the real difficulty of Test Drive Unlimited lies in the traffic dodging. Whether it be in pressing the passenger or transporting vehicles, traffic is the ultimate obstacle, which becomes a lot harder to avoid the faster the car. Think about it, the number of times you need to be in the right position measured in milliseconds, the window is smaller. A single bump or curbing the edge of the intersection ruins the perfect run regardless of distance. It's very strict about careful driving. It might not look like it in the footage, but trust me, once you reach supercar territory and your intention is to not hit anything, there's a real challenge for you. And even then, there's no guarantee you won't hit somebody no matter how hard you try. For example, the camera is positioned in a way that it's hard to see oncoming traffic from the other side, particularly on jumps. Sometimes they try to get out of the way, but they end up in the way as a result. The hit detection can be pretty poor, and the draw distance isn't very long. You can see them cross-blend onto the road, and it feels like they're spawning right in front of you, sometimes literally next to you. That was like something out of Gran Turismo 4 right there. There were a lot of instances when I stopped recording after a few minutes because of the traffic. I just didn't want most of the footage to consist of this. It happened a lot. Yeah, the horn and warning lights don't help much. Keep in mind, I'm not saying that traffic completely ruins the game. It's a simple but effective way to increase the difficulty curve. Just don't expect it to be 100% fair. And there'll be a huge sense of relief whenever you do enter an event that has no traffic at all. And I did it again, I'm ending a review of a decent game on a downer. But that's what happens when you have a map this size. It's difficult to get a full understanding of the way it plays when a lot of the time the roads are either straight or annoyingly uneven. It would have been a serious challenge as a game tester checking every inch of this island to find any glitches. But despite that, the overall package of Test Drive Unlimited, it's still a good racing game. Again, not as much as its rivals at the time, but there are a lot of cars you want to drive that control well enough aside from motorbikes. And even if you stay offline, there's a lot to do. It's as casual as a Sims, Skate, or Roller Coaster Tycoon title for if you love to drive long distances. It almost motivates me to go on a long road trip for the sake of it in real life once this video is complete. I love racing games that make you feel that way, that you're always driving somewhere different with a new car every half an hour. And there's obviously a huge following for this type of thing because Test Drive Unlimited is easily one of the most requested reviews on this channel, if not the most. I have to say, considering that maps like these could be made in 2006, it'd be interesting to see what the upcoming Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown would look like, which at the time of this video we're yet to know where it's set. I don't expect it to be as good, but you never know, I've been surprised before.